Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by the man who many say is the greatest there is at evaluating wide receivers on this podcast. Kyle, how's it going?
Doing good. This is a big show for you. You're here for some redemption, right? You're gonna get this. You're gonna get this spot on the perfect wide receiver rankings.
I think so. I think I need a comeback. I've had an unbelievable bad run, an all-time bad run. I have famously picked Kadarius Toney as my favorite wide receiver a few draft classes ago over Jamar Chase. Last year I had Quentin Johnston. The year before I had Jamison Williams. I'm on I don't know what the opposite of a heater is, but that's what I'm on.
That is fair. At the very least, there seems to be a pretty defined top four. We'll see if you're able to mess this one up. No, just kidding.
We'll see, Kyle. All of the all the takes of you being 0-4 in the Pick'em show. You can make up all that ground on this show.
That is true. Although I was with you on the Jameson Williams bandwagon, but he said so much stuff.
That one's more of an okay. I feel like that one I don't wake up at night thinking what was I doing? Not that I do that with Kadarius Toney, but like that one's at least like I feel more forgivable.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I was higher on Chris Olave than you. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you were. I think that was one of my hot takes. Like people are high on these Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson guys. Like get out of here.
Yeah. We'll see if there's controversy this time around.
We'll see. There's always controversy, Kyle. Let's just jump into the list. Let's go to wide receivers. Let's not bury the lead. Of course, if you are new here, the way we do this is a little bit differently than how everyone does it. I am going to give my top 10 pass catchers list. So this is including the tight ends. We think that mixes things up, including them in there. And plus, I don't know if we want to do a full top 5 tight ends list this year. So it kind of works out both ways. So top 10 pass catchers. We're then going to do top 5 running backs and top 5 offensive linemen in this draft class. So should be a lot a lot of fun. Number 10 on, and Kyle also has his own list. He is going to share that as we go along. Number 10, Kyle, sometimes when you're doing these evaluations, especially for me, who isn't someone who watches a lot of college football, I do this because it's my job to do this, but I also enjoy doing it. You're spending days on end watching different wide receivers. I will fully acknowledge sometimes I give a little bit of a bump to the guy who's just different. The guy who just all of a sudden, oh, wait a second, this guy is 6'7", he's interesting. Johnny Wilson makes my list at number 10. 6'7", 237 pounds. I do wonder if he ends up sort of pulling a Darren Waller and ending up as a tight end at some point in his career, but is currently going into the draft as a wide receiver. He moves very well. Obviously, you have that catch radius at 6'7". He can go down and make a catch as well. He has a drop problem. There's no denying that. And it's definitely someone who everything you say about his movement, you kind of add for his size, right? Like he's good at moving for a guy who's 6'7". That's kind of the thing you say. But still, there's enough upside here. I'm willing to put him on my list. He makes the list at number 10. Kyle, your thoughts?
He didn't make my list.
How dare you?
But he's also one of those guys that I understand. I think this is a justifiable selection because if you're sitting there in the third round, second round, something like that, and you say, you know what, let's take a chance with our pick. Maybe you're a team with an extra draft pick. Let's take a chance on a guy with high upside. Johnny Wilson is probably your highest of high upsides, literally because he's so high. Like he's so high in the air, not high. Mm-hmm. I don't know what he does in his spare time. The guy gets up, he's an incredible leaper, and he's gigantic. Like, there is a lot to really like about that at the wide receiver position. I think saying it's a drop problem is even putting it mildly.
Maybe, perhaps. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's borderline epidemic when it comes to him. So, yeah, I do think that is a major concern and red flag for me. He has some Kelvin Benjamin vibes when it comes to some of that stuff. But also, like, I don't know. I think there is a role for him, I think, in the NFL if he's willing to commit to it. So I do think he can be a tight end, maybe just, a dominant outside receiver with the size. We'll see. But there is some traits to really like. He is off my list, but I understand why you would take the chance on him.
Yeah, I mean, in this wide receiver class is so weird. Where like the top three wide receivers that everyone says are top three, like spoiler alert, I agree. Those guys feel like the high end guys. But then it's like there's kind of one other guy I feel like a lot of people have as consensus four, and then I feel like there's like just like 18 guys where I'm like, yeah, maybe you could be wide receiver five. I can see it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is this is a incredible receiver draft.
Yeah.
And I think, like you mentioned, like from 5 to like 18, you could make an argument for a bunch of different guys. But the thing is I don't think it's because those guys are bad. I think it's all because they're really good.
Right.
And I think the interesting thing is going to be, as you mentioned those top guys, is it going to be worth spending a pick on those guys when there's someone like there's a couple guys on this list who I think could be awesome, and you could get them much later and probably get a lot more value. And we'll go through our list here in a second. I have one tight end in my top 10, and I don't think this is a bad tight end class. I think it's that good of a receiver class, and I think that's what makes it so tough.
Yeah, and that kind of takes us to number 9, which a lot of people have higher. Here's probably maybe my hottest take on this list, but I still like him as a player. Probably like him similarly how everyone else does. Is someone who does still feel like a bit of a projection. I am going Adonai Mitchell out of Texas, a guy who many people have higher on their own personal list, and there's plenty of reasons why. I mean, this is a guy who he is 6'4" and ran a 4.3. That alone is enough to get you super excited. And I think there's even some other, I think he has a very good understanding of how to how the game works, how to use leverage to get open and things like that. My criticism for him and why he's a little bit lower, still have him as a second round talent here, but why I think I'm a little bit lower on him than some others is I just feel like I didn't see it enough. I didn't see it on tape enough. That's great that he ran a 4.3. I didn't see it on film. Apparently, he said like there was like a strategic reason for why he didn't. But like, okay, are you going to make that strategic reason for not going all out in the NFL as well? It's cool that you can do that, and I definitely think there's enough upside. But I see some people having him as wide receiver 5 or 4. I can't go that high.
Yeah, I can agree with this. I mean, I do have him. I have him number 8 on my list, right? So, I mean, he is kind of in the same ballpark as me. I can understand why people would like him more, but the thing I have, like, for someone who's 6'4", like, it didn't feel like he was 6'4" a lot on the football field. Like, I didn't see him like go up and make a bunch of 50-50 catches all the time. And I think that's something I'm a little concerned about because that's your advantage, is being huge, right? Like, I want you to use that size to your advantage. I can understand some of the like schematic thing because like Steve Sarkisian offense, outside receivers are kind of just creating space for over the middle guys, and I can understand why that would be tougher for him, but I can agree with some of it on both sides. Like, I understand why something like that would come up, but yeah, I don't, for a big guy, I just don't feel like he used his size a whole lot, and I want to see it a little bit more, and that's where I have concern.
Yeah, I have in my notes the inconsistent at contested catches. He would occasionally make one, and it looks awesome. And like those are the highlight reels that make when he gets drafted, the team that drafts him is going to get super excited, like the fan base is. But yeah, there's the inconsistency, and if he won, and if he was able to do it more consistently, I do think he'd be higher on the list. But it's that DK Metcalf thing, right? Where if he ends up being successful, everyone's going to say, how the hell did this guy? Why wasn't he drafted way earlier?
Yeah, there's a couple guys like that in this draft too.
Yeah,
and it just like I can't stress this enough. Like, we're putting him at number 9, and this feels disrespectful. This is someone we evaluate as a second round talent. Like, that's how insane this draft is. Like, I just can't stress it enough. Like, this isn't disrespectful. There's just that many guys.
Yeah, no, it's incredible how many and I have him as like a high second rounder. Like I feel like he's a top like 40 pick to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's insane right now. I could see I would draft so many of these guys, like, just because I enjoy watching them play.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. Why don't we? Let's go to number 8 on my list of pass catchers. There's so many guys who just feel so projection based. This is maybe the most projection based. I'm going Troy Franklin out of Oregon, who is another, tall guy at 6'3". He has that speed that can blow by guys. Is skinnier, 187 pounds. I didn't think it was an issue on film, but that is something that is a factor. Also, a guy who has some drop issues is not Johnny Wilson, but will have some drop issues as well. He just, I mean, it's the thing is like his go routes. He's one of those guys where his go routes always won, but due to that, it's basically all he ran. So how do we know exactly what he can do? He's another total projection guy, but I have him here at 8.
Yeah, we're kind of lock in step with these two. I have him at 9, and he's another guy I really like. Like he checks all the boxes you look for in a wide receiver, right? He's big, he's fast, he's agile, he runs good routes, he makes good catches. Like you said, there are some drops, but it's not a whole lot. So yeah, there are a lot of things to really like about him, and I think he's going to be a good pro. I just don't think there's one particular thing I love about him, and there's just a lot of traits from some of the guys above him that I love. I think that's my only. It shouldn't be a knock, but I feel like it's a little bit of a knock. But he just comes off as a good but not great receiver to me, and I think that a good receiver is going to be a good, valuable draft pick in the second round. And there's just a few guys above him that I think have greatness potential.
Yeah, I agree. Are you concerned at all about the fact that, kind of like I said, it feels like a lot of his routes were like just run by the other guy?
The tough thing is, like, yeah, it is because you want to see more of a diverse kind of route tree palette, if you will. You want to see more diverse palette, but I understand it's once again another one of those things. Some of these offenses, like, you want your outside guys to clear the field, take the secondary out of the play. And I think that's really tough to evaluate, but it also seems like he has that in his bag if he needs it. So it's just one of those wait and see things. I think this was a knock on Chris Olave too. Like, he just ran past a lot of guys in college, but like, the offense tells you to run deep. Like, you're supposed to do your job.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is, like, and that's why wide receivers are so difficult, right? Because it's like, you're so good at go routes, that's all you run in college, and then it's like, oh, what? And then sometimes that player then just gets to the NFL, does other routes, and is great at those too. Sometimes that player turns out all they could do was run go routes, and when you have a fast corner on you, it doesn't work out as well.
Yeah. I mean, it really depends. Like the new modern version of the spread offense in college. I mean, it's such a cheat code. Like, they put these guys way out beyond the numbers, basically on the sideline, and just say run downfield. And I mean, they're just trying to create as much space as possible. It's just really hard to evaluate those guys on the outside whose job is to create space. I mean, I think people call it like the veer and shoot. I don't know exactly what to call the offense, but it makes it very hard to evaluate. I agree.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. Why don't we? A couple more guys who I think are in this vein. I have 2 more players. My 7 and 6 are also both high second round talents on the list. I'm going Xavier Leggetti. Is that how you say out of South Carolina? Kyle, you're the name pronunciation guy here.
I think so. I don't know, actually.
Okay, we'll go with Leggetti. Maybe it might be Leggett, actually. I'll say Leggett. That seems better. And very impressive highlights. The highlight reel is fantastic with Leggett here out of South Carolina. He's a 6'3" receiver, but he also can go up and get it. Has a really good catch radius, which is definitely something that you want to see, and is also very fast. He's another one of those guys where he doesn't have a great route tree, and I don't think he's a great route runner either, which at 23 is probably his biggest knock. The other knock, definitely a 1-year wonder. There's definitely the concern of, is this guy who just kind of, once he got enough playing time, was able to get it going. But I think the upside is still enough for me that I'm willing to put him here at number 7 on my list. Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. He's on my honorable mentions list just because of those concerns. Mm-hmm. But he to me has that DK Metcalf factor even more than Mitchell, because I mean, you just look at him. He's tall, he's strong, he's built like a tank. I mean, he's one of the most physically gifted players, I think, in this receiver class. And it's like, if he turns out to be the best receiver in this class, you're like, well, duh, look at him. Yeah. But I do think there are enough concerns from his college tape to knock him a little bit. And like you said, it is the 1-year sample size. So I have him knocked a little bit because of that. But that being said, like, the physical gifts are extremely tantalizing.
It kind of feels like we're almost describing the same player over and over again a little bit with this. And even my next guy is kind of in that same vein. I don't know. They're very difficult to, pick apart and rank here. I think some of these guys too, it might just come down to like, how well did he do in the interview?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many guys here that it's like the 6'1" to 6'4" receiver market is insane this year. There are so many guys that fit that profile. 6'1", 6'4", 200 to 225 pounds. Like, those guys, there are just so many guys in that bracket in this draft. It's insane. It's absolutely insane what we're dealing with here. And then there's of course Johnny Wilson who's 6'7". But
Right.
there's just that bracket of receiver. Outside help is definitely a plenty in this one, or I guess X if you want to use football term.
Yeah. All of a sudden, people have just started saying X receiver all the time. I don't know. I always like saying outside or number one receiver.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's one of those things. I feel like some football people say things that just sound smarter, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we get it. You understand the terminology. Like, the average person listening isn't going to be like, oh, that's the X receiver.
Yeah, I think we get it. I don't know. You can say the outside receiver. It's an easier, because if we say X, not everyone's going to get it. I think that's why I say outside.
It's like saying Mike linebacker. Like, just say the guy in the middle.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there is something to that. I think. I think I had something else I was gonna say, but I don't remember what it was. So, want to just move on to number 6?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, number 6 is a really interesting prospect. Maybe another kind of, I said kind of in the same vein, a very boomer bust guy, Keon Coleman out of Florida State, who I think is going to be a very controversial prospect. He's one of those guys where if he fails or succeeds, I feel like no one's going to be surprised. Like if 3 years from now, even if you're a fan, you're going to say like, well, yeah, of course he failed. And if you're a hater, you're going to say, you could say, like, oh yeah, of course he succeeded. He ran a 4.6. That's the why no one would be surprised if he didn't succeed, and doesn't have a great route tree either, and doesn't get a ton of separations. So what the hell do I like about him? Well, I think he moves really good for a 6'4" guy. He's only 20 years old. He'll show these flashes of great footwork, and he makes these really good contested catches. So again, he is the last of the high second round tier guys for me. I think he's a very, some people are going to say, don't even think about him that high. Some people are going to say, you got to get him higher. But for me, that's where I view him.
Yeah, I have him number 7, and he's one of my most fun players in the draft. I think that's his biggest appeal.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
You said good contested catches. I mean, this guy outside of a Doomsday, he's probably the best contested catch guy in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a special talent. And, I think it's one of the hardest talents to evaluate as far as NFL goes, because making a lot of contested catches means you're not getting a lot of separation, right? So how does that translate to the NFL when you're going against top level corners? That's the toughest question, I think, when it comes to Coleman. That being said, this guy's leaping ability is just absolutely insane. He goes up and gets every ball. He can get it with one hand. He can get it with one finger, it feels like sometimes. Some of the catches he made feel Odell Beckham-esque. And I think he has that sort of potential of young Odell with his skill set. I mean, the famous thing with Florida State is he dunked in jeans, and I think it was like flip-flops or something. Slides maybe.
I remember that now. Yeah.
Dunking in slides and jeans, and that's basically what they were like, wow, this guy's special. He was special at Michigan State, and they barely had quarterback play. I think he feels like a one-trick pony, but the problem is that one trick is so amazing and so jaw-dropping that you're just tantalized. So, yeah, give me Keon Coleman. I'll take the chance on that kind of player.
Is that the dunking in slides and jeans? It almost reminds me a little bit of like the Tristan Wirfs being able to jump out of a swimming pool thing, where it's like, okay, it shouldn't matter at all, but like you better believe if your team drafts Keon Coleman and you see that highlight, you're gonna be like, hell yeah.
Yeah, you're like, this is special.
Yeah, like of course, it's just one of those things. It gets you excited about a player. Yeah. So, interesting. I think bottom 5. Do you agree with me that the top 5 feel like those 5 players are kind of the correct 5 that most people have?
I think for the most part, I do have one guy that cracked my top 5 above the prototypical top 5.
Okay.
And it doesn't seem like he's on his list, so we could talk about that one at the end.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's get into number 5. Then, oops, I spoiled number 4. Let's talk about
never mind.
5. So we have a different. Interesting. So yeah, I'm going with Ladd McConkey out of Georgia, who interested in hearing what you're going to say about it. I think he is someone who is a I have my notes, Kyle. This is a guy who would have been my number one wide receiver like 4 years, like 2 years ago, right? I would have fallen in love with Ladd McConkey, with the explosiveness, the shiftiness. He is someone who can make a contested catch, can make these in traffic catches. The thing is, he's very much not. I even put in my notes, not an X. So I guess even I'm falling, I'm using the X term with the receiver. He is someone who is situation dependent. He's 6 feet tall, 185 pounds. These amount of his wins are just like sitting down in coverage, but I like the shiftiness. I like the explosiveness enough. To me, I do have a first round grade on McConkey. Kyle, you had a reaction when I revealed Ladd McConkey. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I had him number 5 too. I thought,
Okay,
there's another guy I feel like is another person who's brought up among the top 5 a little bit more. So we can talk about him because I had him 6.
gotcha.
But yeah, I really like McConkey too. I think he's shifty. I think he's really quick. I think he's going to be an excellent, kind of slot or secondary
Excellent.
receiver. Excellent. Yeah. Like you said, he's not a guy who's going to typically win one-on-ones on the outside all the time, but he does so much stuff that I think is devastating and fits in a lot of modern football schemes. I think it's going to be really good. Please don't let the Chiefs draft this guy. That's my one thing. Just don't. Like this wouldn't be fair if the Chiefs get him. So I think he has a devastating combination of speed and elusiveness, and I think it's going to be a really good slot receiver for a long time.
Yeah, that'd be good for the Chiefs. I mean, I guess the question is, that's kind of the concern, though, right? Doesn't it feel like these slot receivers that are projected to be late first round picks sometimes struggle? Like, obviously, Kadarius Toney was the kind of most notable one, but even like Sky Moore, you brought up the Chiefs, like who ended up going to second, but kind of similar mold. Is that concerning at all?
A little bit. Yeah, I would say so. But at the same time, like I think, like I don't think Tony's issue is talent, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think talent is Kadarius Tony's issue. Like I think it's mental and physical injuries, right? I think that's a bigger issue for him. When it comes to Sky Moore, I don't think Sky Moore. I still think Sky Moore has some talent and has a reason to buy in, but I think McConkey is a little more explosive. I think he's closer to that Tony level of explosiveness than he is, Sky Moore. So I think that separation makes a bit of a difference. And I think Zay Flowers also showed that type of player can be pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's a good counter to Zay Flowers thing. I think I'm with you, but I think the other counter argument would be, can't you get a good slot receiver in round 3 or 4?
Yes, in this draft. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah. In this draft in general, I think there's a lot of debate as to when you should draft a wide receiver, and should you, out of the guys who aren't the elite 3, should you kind of be less inclined to take the 4th best receiver, maybe more so trying to just take like the 10th best receiver and just wait on it because you'll probably still get a player in the same ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, I think if like a guy like him, if he dips, it's going to be because of that, right? Like it's not because of his talent. It's because, a guy on my honorable mentions, like you could totally talk me into taking Xavier Worthy in the 3rd round being worth it over a guy like Ladd McConkey in the 1st round. Like just from a value standpoint.
Yeah.
Like Xavier Worthy has a lot of the similar explosiveness, slot receiver impact. I think like it would be justifiable. It's just, where do you value a guy who's a better prospect, even though it's a different value selection?
Yeah, I think it should be very interesting. But let's talk about the top 4 players. So I think these are the real 4 that we, are all here to see. Because what's great about this draft class is it isn't just a really deep draft class in terms of pass catchers. There's also the elite players. I think there would have been some suspense as to, where I had this player. I guess there still is for the audio-only listeners. The people watching along saw I accidentally put it on the screen earlier. But number 4 on my list, I am going Brock Bowers out of Georgia. Kyle, I really like Brock Bowers. I was, quite frankly, going into it, I'm like, okay, sure, this new generational tight end. Yeah. Let me watch I don't know why. I was so negative going into it, but I was, and I was blown away. The guy's amazing. The way he, cuts, and the way how quickly he can move. At times in open space, he looked like Gronkowski out there. He's not quite as big. 6'4", 240. Yeah. Maybe that's the one. Knock. I think the other knock is just, will the physicality work at the NFL level the way it did in college? But I don't know. At times he was Georgia's offense, it felt like. And, I just think there's so much good with him. I think for a tight end, to me, he is a better prospect than the wide receivers. I just think that a tight end is going to hurt his stock a little bit, which is why I have him down at 4.
Yeah, I have him 3. And I probably should have separated him based on position a little bit more, but like, I don't know, because I see some having him like 12 to 15 kind of draft range. And I mean, frankly, I guess this draft is probably better, but like he's in the Kyle Pitts tier of like tight end prospects for me. Yeah, he's a little smaller than I think like some of the top level tight ends, but maybe he grows into his size a little bit more. But this, like, he's a tight end who can, who did pretty well blocking. He's an excellent pass catcher. This guy was taking end arounds, like jet sweeps.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this is the special talent at the tight end position. And yeah, I would buy everyone's Brock Bowers stocks. I have him number 3. I think he's a lock for the first round, and I think he's going to be a stud. I think, even if tight end has a little bit of more of a learning curve at the NFL, I think he's going to be able to step in and catch passes right away.
Yeah, well, to me, that's the biggest concern I have. Is like you look at I made a video on this. So like, when should you draft a tight ends? And first round tight ends do typically end up being better than second round tight ends, but it's not like a huge jump the way it is for a lot of other positions. I would say though that the first tight end selected has a very high hit rate though. So usually it's like that first guy tends to be very good, but maybe after that there can be some question marks. I don't know. There was a point when I was like, he's number 1 on this list, and then I kind of thought, well, I don't know about that. But just because again, the tight end stuff, I had to talk myself out of it. I get excited sometimes with players, but no, I think he's great. Yeah, but the tight end thing is the question. And I think, Kyle Pitts is going to work against him. I have a higher grade on Bowers than I did on Pitts, but at the same time, it's still like that's going to hurt it's going to hurt him that Kyle Pitts has ended up being a good player, but not like this superstar level player like people thought. I think that's going to hurt Bowers' draft stock a little.
Yeah, I think there's potential for that. And it's also just kind of positional need. Teams typically play 3 wide receivers at a time. Teams typically play, like, yes, there are different formation schemes. Teams run different stuff, but the most teams run 3 wide receiver formations, and typically that involves 1 tight end. So it's just less positional value too. So I think that plays a factor. Like you said, Kyle Pitts being such a regarded prospect and slipping, I think plays a factor. All of that plays a factor. I'm just saying, I think this guy's going to be amazing. That's the reason why I have him up high. And, if you're a team that's tight end needy, he's definitely someone I would target right away.
Also, I just realized why there was such a confusion at the number 5 spot, Kyle. I forgot a player. I was looking through my notes. I forgot to put Brian Thomas Jr. on my list. So that's what threw things up. So no scorching hot takes. Just made a mistake. So my bad there.
Okay, so where is Brian Thomas? Is Brian Thomas 5 on your list?
Yeah, he's 5. Lab McConkey is 6. That was a bad job by me.
Okay, so
Johnny Wilson does not make the list, unfortunately.
Okay, so he's on your honorable mentions. Okay, so let's talk about Brian Thomas here for a second then. Do you want to do your Brian Thomas notes and then I'll react?
Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, I mean, I think he's really good. I think that, I'm not quite as high on him as Chris Sims was, who I believe had him at like number 2. But again, it's one of those things where it's similar to the DK Metcalf thing of like, if he hits, like people will say, yeah, of course he was going to hit, you idiot. Because like, he does have that incredible footwork. He can blow by guys. He can't, again, one of those guys where when he hits the contested catches, it looks incredible. He doesn't always hit them, but when he hits them, they do look great. I think so many of his catches were like these underneath kind of schemed open stuff because obviously there's Malik Neighbors, who we still have to talk about. The situation did do him a lot of favors. Has a good quarterback to throw to, all that stuff. But there's so much good stuff here. Only a fool would leave him off their list.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I did have him 6. I had Lad McConkey in front of him. As I was saying, that was kind of my hottish take.
That's a hot take, I think. And that wouldn't have been quite as hot as if I left them off the list altogether. But that's still, which I think people thought was happening. But no, I think it's still a hot take.
Yeah, I think, he's a great downfield receiver. I think he makes a lot of awesome catches downfield. You kind of listed all that stuff out. I am a little concerned about him against like man coverage, like consistently. And there are more man coverage teams in the NFL, right? And better man coverage corners in the NFL, obviously. And, is he going to continually if teams press him more and more? I think that was his kind of one knock is like, I don't think he got his separation as quickly. And it helped that he had an elite wide receiver next to him and an elite offensive line blocking for his elite quarterback. you know, if he's not able to get that separation as quickly as he has dominant downfield? That's my question I have.
Doesn't this seem like a good, like, I don't know, not to mock every single player to my favorite team, like the Buccaneers, this would be a good fit for, right? Of like to have the number one receiver that, they can just let him be an outside guy going up against number two receivers, like something like that. Maybe the Bengals do it as like a replacement for T. Higgins. Like that feels like the right move for Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think he makes sense at both of those spots. I think the tough thing would be like he's obviously not mocked to go, but one of these teams that are really receiver needy, taking him at like if he slips a little to the top of the second round or something like that, or taking him early first round, like the Bears taking him at 9 because he's the fourth receiver. I feel like it would be interesting. I guess they did get Keenan Allen. I just forgot about that, but yeah, it would be interesting to see exactly the situation he ends up in.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the top three now. Top three, again, no huge hot takes. These are the top three. I have the same top three everyone else does, but in what order? Because there is some debate here. I think most people, I'm interested too, because you had one of these players on number 4 on your list behind Brock Bowers. I'm going Rome Odunze here as my number 3 wide receiver. He is the consensus number 3 wide receiver, and I still believe number 6 on the big board. I believe the big board has 3 quarterbacks and then 3 receivers. Listen, at times his hands are magnets out. It just feels like he can go up and make these plays so well. He got open so consistently. The way he can adjust to the ball and the way that he can go up and make a grab at 6'3" is fantastic. It does remind me of the Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, Drake London mold. I think there's, my negatives are, I think he's a great prospect. My negatives are sometimes he didn't have to play the toughest opponents. I think sometimes he would struggle versus press coverage. I saw, and while he moves well for his size, he's not quite as shifty as some other players. Just because, again, 6'3". There's other shiftier guys ahead of him, the top 2 guys. And I just have Quentin Johnston PTSD. It's a different situation. They're not the same player, but that's probably factoring in a little.
I agree with all that. I do have him 4. He was the guy at number 4. I mean, he is a fantastic football catcher. Like he is just, the ball really hits the ground when it's thrown his way, right? I think he's the best contested catch player in this draft. Some of it is DeAndre Hopkins-esque, if we're gonna go, with some comparisons there. It's a special talent and one that not many players have. The big thing is separation. Those separation guys always scare me. Now, I did have Drake London irrationally high on my board when he was in the draft. I love Drake London. So, is it, year to year am I flipping? I just think like the guys ahead of him, I trust a little bit more in different spots. I think those are better receiver prospects than even Drake London were. I think having that sort of nuance, I think adds to it. And, I'm always going to be slightly skeptical of guys who don't get a lot of separation in college because it's going to be even harder to get a lot of separation in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, Drake London, he did get separation in college, right? It was just like he wasn't the fastest guy and kind of had to use his route running to make it work. And the question was like, is that going to work at the NFL level? But yeah, I kind of agree with you where it's like Odunze and London might be similar prospects, but like if Drake London was in this class, he's not a top 2 prospect.
No, I don't think he is either. I mean, he'd probably be 5th for me, honestly. So,
I mean,
that's just as a prospect, yes. So that just says what I say, what I feel about these guys coming out of college. So, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it works out because he is so darn good at catching every one of those contested catch balls. But it is a very difficult skill to have, and it's a very difficult skill to continue to translate and win consistently.
Yeah. Top 2 on this list. This is a debate to me. I don't think it's crazy to have either of these top 2 guys at number 1. I really don't. I think you could argue either one. Am I going to go with the hot take? No, I'm not. Malik Neighbors, number 2 on my list. But again, you can make the argument for number 1. At 6 feet, 200 pounds, he feels like a baby compared to some of these other guys with, how big and tall a lot of these players are. But it's still, not bad height. The guy's so explosive. He moves like Antonio Brown out there, and he can make these catches in traffic. I wrote in my notes. Sometimes he runs by guys like he's playing on rookie, and like where it's like they just like can't keep up. I think he could, So the contested catch thing it's becoming like a talking point of like the Malik Neighbors contested catch stuff. I think when it's like a fade route, like a goal line fade, like these kind of, designed plays to go up and get a ball, he can do that. I think his issue is more so when things get a little bit wonky. Like when the throw is not exactly where he needs it to be. He needs to go up over a guy. Could be better at that. It's not a massive negative, but he could be better at that. I also don't think he's a great route runner, but he's also 20 years old. So, similar to Brian Thomas, was in a great situation with a great quarterback, but I still think that he's very good, and he's number 2 on my list.
Yeah, here's my counter to the people who said he was not awesome at contested catches. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to show that you're awesome at contested catches when you're open every single fucking play.
Like, yeah, that's fair. Very fair.
This guy is absolutely unbelievable. The explosiveness, the twitchiness. I mean, it's all there. I mean, he has traits that are. He's the best yard after catch guy I've probably since we started doing this draft stuff. He's probably the best yards after catch guy I've seen.
Like, I remember Chase was really good too, but yeah, you might be right.
Yeah, Chase was up there too. I mean, this guy catches the ball and goes, and it's very difficult to tackle. He's quick. He's elusive. I mean, this guy's incredible. He's open all the time. I think he has a lot of refined traits. Like you said, I think he could, fine tune his route running, but he is young, and I do trust the talent that it's going to work out. So I would buy all in on Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors feels like a consolation prize to Marvin Harrison Jr., but he is definitely not a consolation prize. This guy would be a number 1 wide receiver in a lot of draft classes. He's a special talent.
Yeah. Kyle, if the Patriots select him at number 3, how do you feel?
Oh, my gosh. Now you're putting me on the spot after everything I just said nice about him.
Uh-huh.
He's a good player. I think he would be very good. The problem is that we need we need a quarterback. So, I mean, quarterback trumps all positions. I'm sorry.
Gotcha. Well, did he make your number 1 or number 2 on this list?
He was number 2 for me. I didn't want to get to this. Wasn't a hot take for me either. I think he's a fantastic prospect. And like I said, a lot of other years, he would be number 1.
Yeah, well, let's go to number 1, who in most years would be number 1. Marvin Harrison Jr. has gotten that generational prospect label thrown on him. And, is that fair? Is that unfair? Well, listen, number 1 in a loaded draft class. Guy's 6'4" and just is so explosive. Like, people, the 40 time, I believe he didn't run a 40. I think people assume it'd be kind of right around like low 4.4s or high 4.3s. But like on tape, he just runs by people so frequently. The out routes he would run were just like unstoppable at Ohio State. It's hard to imagine him failing. I think the concern is like, I think I've said this a few times. If he ends up being DJ Moore, people are going to be like, what a bum, what a bust, horrible job. I think the expectations are so high from Marvin Harrison Jr. of like he has to be this superstar level receiver, and you just don't know if that's going to happen. A couple of notes, a couple of nitpicks, I suppose. Another guy who I don't think is elite at the contested catch stuff, kind of similar to what you said about Neighbors. When you're always open, it's hard to get to prove that you can do that. But, he will have some drops in there. I do think the system helps him get open a little bit, and it's a little bit skinny. But again, these feel like nitpicks when you talk about the grand scheme of things, just how frequently, just like watching regular film, just going back and watching the film, how often he was getting open. It felt like he was uncoverable for most of his time at Ohio State.
Yeah, uncoverable indeed. And I guess the other thing is like he really disliked his quarterback play last year. Like it was very noticeable at times. But I mean, this guy changed games. Like he won this team games last season that they probably had no business winning. He's an incredible pass catcher. He's an incredible route runner. He's probably the best route runner in this incredibly stacked class. He creates separation just so easily. It looks effortless for him. I don't know if I agree with some of the Randy Moss comparisons that he's getting, but like there's a lot to really like. So it's not really, he is up there in that top level receiver category, generational prospect for me for sure. He has just so many gifts that it's impossible to quantify just everything he can do really well. He's a 1-on-1. I think it's going to be amazing. And, I think any team is going to be very happy to have him, especially when they're probably not going to have to use a top 3 pick for him because he's that level of a player. He might be the best player in this draft in general.
Yeah. So I'll ask you the question again. Does it change anything as a Patriots fan? Like if Marvin Harrison's the guy, or is it still you'd be disappointed?
I'd be happier with him than Neighbors because I think he's that special.
Okay,
But
gotcha.
yeah, I still think it should be quarterback.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Well, that is our wide receivers. Let's took a while, but I felt like we could take our time there, as that seems to be the main thing people are going to be here for. The offensive line and running backs. We're just doing top 5 for. Do you want to just jump into this?
Sure. Do you want me to go through some guys I had?
Oh yeah. Let's do honorable mentions. Yeah. What other wide receivers did you have?
So one guy I had on my list that you didn't have, I had him at number 10 because I didn't have Ligeti on my list. That was Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. When you get the Steve Smith stamp of approval, I like it. And he's just kind of a baller. A couple guys I really like too. The other tight end I really like is Jatavian Sanders, but it's just such a stacked receiver room. And then the one guy I would probably consider to put on this list, I just really like his game, is Roman Wilson at Michigan. He's another guy I'm just a big fan of.
Yeah. I considered all those. Sanders was my number 11. I guess technically number 12 because I screwed up my list. But another guy, Jermaine Burton, I think is worth mentioning as someone who, I think this tape, he might have been on the list. Probably would have been on the list had, it not been for some character issues, we'll say. So there's that. But yeah, those were kind of my, other than the guys you mentioned, that's my other honorable mention.
Yeah. The other Washington receivers too, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, like those guys are awesome too. Like
we could have done a top 20 list. We really could have.
Honestly, yeah, it's really good. So let's just move on before we talk too much more.
Yeah. The only other thing I was going to say, am I a traitor for not giving fellow YouTuber Roman Wilson is not on my list? Does that make me a traitor?
A little bit. I didn't even realize he had a YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, it's because I always search just like try to get the game film on YouTube. It's just easier to do it that way for me when I'm trying to get the highlights. And it's like I search his name and just his YouTube channel come. I'm like, oh.
Fair enough. I mean, yeah, it's that's interesting.
It's a lot of footage of I would describe it best as like documentary B-roll with music behind it. That seems to be most of it. Just put like a behind the scenes things. That's probably how I'd best describe it.
That's funny. All right, well, that's interesting.
So if that's your thing, check out shout out to Roman Wilson's YouTube channel. Let's get into the offensive line, a position that I've historically done a lot better at evaluating. We all have our misses, but I try to use kind of a combination of analytics and game film for this stuff. Number 5, Kyle, I have 7 offensive linemen with first round grades. I think this is a great offensive line draft class. We could have done more, but I didn't really feel like I had full 10, so figured let's just do this. Number 5, J.C. Latham out of Alabama. Guys, very big guy, 6'6", 335 pounds. And he's only 21, so can get better. The highlights are amazing with a guy like him. He has he could be a guard or tackle. The strength is great, and when he gets his hands right, he's unbelievable. It just sometimes he gets a bit too aggressive, comes back to bite him. I think he's a bit raw of a player. The analytics aren't spectacular. They're not a disaster, but not spectacular. And he can get off balance as well. So I kind of have him as more of a back of the first round type of guy, but I think there's a lot of intrigue with him.
Yeah, I do have a first round grade on him. I do have him 6th on my list, just off the board, top 5. And agree with a lot of what you said. I do think he's a little aggressive. I think, like you said, it hurts him in penalties. I think it hurts him in run blocking somewhat, which isn't as important as pass blocking, but it hurts a little bit. I think those are the couple things you can nitpick. And there's also just a couple physical freaks and offensive tackle this year. So I think that also knocks him a little bit when it probably shouldn't. It's just that there's a lot of really good players.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to number 4. I don't know if we'll spend forever on the offensive line. Number 4, I am going center. I'm not being a traitor when it comes to my name, Jackson Powers Johnson, which is a great name. Jackson Powers. I think Johnson's a little bit long. Jackson Powers would be the ideal name, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
He would be higher on the list. I think if dropped it, it's showbiz, Jackson. You gotta drop the Johnson. Let's make the name a little bit more exciting. He's a center out of Oregon who analytics are fantastic. PFF grades are fantastic. It consistently get wins. I think when he gets to the second, he's so good at getting to the second level. I think the only real weakness is, well, for one thing, people say small arms, but like I don't care about that. If you win, you win, whatever. It's like, what's the upside here, and how valuable is it to get like just like a good quality like center? But I think there's a lot of value in that. I'd spend a first round pick on Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yeah, he's number 5 on my list. He's kind of one of the more entertaining offensive linemen to watch. If that's, that may be an oxymoron, but he is, he's quick, he's strong. Like you said, he does win a lot. He gets to the second level. He creates holes. I mean, they ran a lot of their offense the way they did because he could create holes for those running backs. And I thought he was really impactful. Makes a lot of sense for Philadelphia after losing an athletic Hall of Fame center, right? Like that's probably almost too perfect of a fit. If he falls that far, we'll see. But yeah, I'm a big fan of his. And, as far as interior offensive linemen go, I think he's above and beyond the top guy. And it's just a really good tackle draft.
The offensive line heads aren't going to like you saying oxymoron, entertaining offensive lineman.
That's fair. I'm a casual, I guess.
I suppose so. Yeah. The next one on my list, Kyle, you're gonna have to help me out with this name here. It's a tough one.
Just do Olu Fashanu. Just do the OLU.
Okay. Olu Fashanu.
Yeah.
Okay. Fashanu is an interesting prospect. This, definitely a tackle, 6'6", 320. It moves very well for his size. I think he has really quick hands and pass protection. I think the length works to his benefit. And I think he's a smart player. He understands how to pick up blitzes and things like that. The run blocking is an issue. To me, he's just way too cautious in it. He doesn't go out and attack guys. He kind of lets the running game go to him, which is not how you attack the running game. He's like the one guy he's the only offensive lineman in history who prefers to pass protect, right? Like I've never, he's the only guy who's ever done that. Fashanu, the pass blocking was fantastic. When you get a great pass blocking tackle, that's worth a first round pick. And I do believe the running game can be coached up. He is a young guy at 21, but with that projection, that's going to hurt his stock a little.
I can get it. I did have him number 1.
Wow. That's a scorching hot take, Kyle.
Is it? I don't know.
I think so.
I've seen him one on a few.
Okay, I'll look up the consensus big board, but that feels like a classic Jackson take.
I don't know. I think he is very technically defined, and I think he's also extremely athletic and a monster, and I think all of that goes together. Like, I don't know. Like, I would rather have a guy who's, not as aggressive in run blocking compared to a guy like JC Latham who can be over aggressive in run blocking and commit penalties. Because I think the aggressiveness could be taught a little bit more. And I just think that the guy is so darn good in pass blocking. I think he's easily the best pass blocker in this draft. That that's the number 1 trait you need in an offensive lineman. That's just, it's a passing game. And if you're elite at that, he's the best at it. I think that matters. And I think that's why I have him number 1.
I like how during that sentence you censored saying "damn" to say "darn," despite the fact that you dropped an F-bomb earlier in the show. I think that's fun. But
yeah, true.
So I looked up the consensus big board. Joe Alt is 9. Fashanu is 15, so he is 3rd on the offensive line consensus big board as well. So it's a bit of a warm take. It is. I guess. I almost have to wait until him versus Joe Alt because before we really get into it, so maybe we'll wait until there. But I'm with you in the fact that I think he's a really good player. I just think that run blocking is still an important part of being an offensive lineman.
Yeah, and I can get that. I can get behind it, but I just think that in a passing league, I'm going to take the best pass blocker and hope to coach that up more than a guy who's, I don't think, as good as pass blocker. And I think this guy is a special pass blocker and could step in and be one of the best pass blocking offensive tackles right away in the NFL.
Well, wow. Okay. Well, you might be higher on him than his parents are.
That's okay. I think he's that talented and I think he's that technically refined. I think all that stuff, he's just technically skilled. And I think that really matters.
I think he'll be very good as well. I'm with you that I'm very high on him. I think that there's a couple of guys I do like better. Another tough name, Talise Fuaga.
Yes.
Okay, nailed it. Fuaga. So I think kind of the knock against him, I suppose, is that there's some debate. As I think for me, he could be a guard or a tackle. I think that's kind of the thing to look at. He is not the pass protecting monster that are the last guy we talked about, whose name is no longer on my screen, and I don't want to try to pronounce it again.
Fashanu, yes.
It's not quite as good as him at that. But to me, again, this comes down to a value thing and a scheme fit thing. I don't think it's crazy for you to, depending on how your team is, put him as 3 on your board. But to me, I don't really value tackles more than guards. I think there's a lot of evidence to support they're kind of just as valuable. And I think that he could, if he was a guard or if he's a great run blocking tackle, to me, I would take that. I do think he's a bit more of a run blocker than a pass blocker, but he can pass block. The pass blocking analytics are fine. Run blocking analytics are amazing. He will sometimes overcommit, kind of like what we talked about, but not too often. He's very good and also a very smart player. Can pick up the stunts. I think if you move him to the inside, he'll work there. 6'6", 340. I'm very high on Fuaga.
Yeah, I really like him too. I have him 3. I think he's a high first round grade 2. I think he's really talented. And he is just incredibly strong. He just moves bodies. And I would agree with you. He's a better run blocker than I think Fashanu, but I think Fashanu is ahead of him in pass blocking. And that's the difference in the grade for me. I just think, yeah, I think that he brings a lot to the table, but I think the thing is like, when I'm separating him between the top 2 guys, I think those guys are a little more physically gifted. And I think that's the difference. And, if I have a guy who's incredibly talented and physically gifted versus a guy who's incredibly talented and not as physically gifted, although he is still physically gifted, I think that's a little bit different for me.
Yeah. And me, I care more about I'll look at PFF grades. Like to me, that's a great tool as PFF grades tend to translate to the next level pretty well at the offensive line position. I also like to look at, like win rate and things like that when it comes to offensive linemen. So it comes down to a little bit too of like, I'm sure that we both evaluated the players similarly, but might just have different feels for how we, what we value.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've done this before. I think, I've been wrong on it before because I bet on a guy like Mekhi Becton because he's just a physical freak.
Yeah.
And it works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't.
Right. Number 1, the guy that you hate and say that
geez.
no chance he will work at the NFL level. Joe Alt, the consensus number 1 player. I've seen some mock drafts having him even as I don't know. I don't think I've seen him as like top 5, but I feel like I've seen like top 7. I'm a big fan of Joe Alt. I think that again, the analytics are fantastic with him. When I watched him, it feels like he's like an A in every category at least. Like the hands are good. I don't think he gets fooled. He's a very smart player. Some of these blocks he would hold on to for like 10 seconds. It felt like guys just weren't ever going to get through to him. I think it's hard to imagine Joe Alt failing. I think that every other player, there is a weakness you can point to. I think Alt doesn't really have that other than sometimes for a 6'8" guy can get off balance. We've seen that with Evan Neal. Granted, I think Alt is a little bit bigger than Evan Neal. And just because Evan Neal failed doesn't mean you should never draft a 6'8" tackle. I guess the arm length isn't quite what you'd expect for a 6'8" guy. But again, that's not really, there's no evidence to support the arm length actually matters at the NFL level enough to pay too much attention to it. So, Kyle, I'm a big fan of Joe Alt. Why are you slightly lower on him than the consensus?
I mean, he's top 10 in my board. I have Fashanu in top 10. It seems like that's not the consensus. I have him number 2 here. He looks like a tree out there. He's just gigantic. Yeah. He's monstrous. I guess my question is he too big? Like, is that
maybe it's a fair point.
Is he too big? Like I think he can get pushed backwards sometimes, and I think that's tough. And especially when you're big, when you're pushed back further, it's tougher to throw in the pocket when a big 6'8" guy is standing over the top of you because he's being pushed back. I think that's my one nitpick. I mean, it sounds like more concern than I should have because, like I said, he's a top 10 prospect for me. But it is the one nitpick to Fashanu where I feel like Fashanu, when he's pass blocking, doesn't move. He doesn't move backwards. I think this guy can get pushed backwards a few times more than Fashanu and a little bit more than Fashanu. And I think that's where I have the knock.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen, to me, I think I've seen Alt as an even better pass blocker than Fashanu. So maybe we just, I don't know. I never know what to do with that situation. Once I think one thing's better, someone else thinks the other thing's better. Like, where do you go from there? The valuation is just different. But I would also say, I think the run blocking is a world different. I think Alt is also just, an elite level run blocker. And so to me, getting the guy who feels like a complete product. Even if there is maybe a slightly higher upside in Fashanu, if there is enough projection there, I'm going to take the guy who I think is better, even if he is also 2 inches taller.
Yeah. I definitely would concede that. Joe Alt is scary when he runs downhill. Like this guy, I think he can move mountains, honestly. So I completely understand that. He's going to be scary in screen pass situations too. Those things I would definitely concede. It's just one minor concern.
Well, I was gonna. Maybe this conversation doesn't quite work as well now that I see that you're a little bit lower on Joe Alt. But I have a quick question before we get into the running backs. I had a harebrained theory about what the Patriots could do the draft. What if so? In an ideal situation, what if the Giants say, you know what, we want a quarterback. We're done with Daniel Jones. Let's do a trade. You can get some extra draft capital. What if you don't go wide receiver or quarterback with number 3? You trade it back and you get either a Joe Alt or a Brock Bowers. Then in round 2, you get one of the quarterbacks that falls to you, and you hopefully have other draft capital. So maybe you get an extra second round pick now. You can double down on receiver with the high third and another second round pick. And now you get a couple of these good receivers. How would you feel about that?
No.
No.
Like I don't mind the idea of one of these tackles. I think the big thing for me is like as we did last week, like I don't love some of these second round quarterbacks. Like if Penix falls out of the back of the first round, like I don't love the options for second round quarterback. And even a guy like Penix, who I do like, I think he's kind of old, has some injury history that scares me a little bit. But I would definitely be happy. Like if it becomes the option of like Spencer Rattler, Bo Nix for the second round, I would be concerned about that trade.
Yeah.
That's my worry.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's a fun. I don't know if it's a good idea, but I think it'll be a fun idea. For me, for someone who has no vested interest in it.
Yeah, it's convenient. It's always me. No.
Yeah, it's gonna be so fun when the Patriots don't draft any of these wide receivers we just mentioned.
Yeah, they're gonna wait all the way till the 6th round or something and draft somebody out of Liberty or whatever.
Yeah, or in the 2nd round draft a guy who's supposed to go in like the 4th round.
Yeah, Demario Douglas just drafted again.
Right. Yeah. There's things they could do. Running backs. Go through here. I don't think we'll spend forever here, but there's some interesting to talk. So I'll be honest. It's a bad running back class. I don't think it's a great running back class. And in fact, even filling up the top 5 was a little bit tough here, Kyle. I think that there's a lot of running backs that people are bringing up. It's like, oh, maybe this guy. So you kind of have to get through to, weed through some of these guys. I found 5 that I'm interested in. But to be honest, even number 5 on my list, I'm not crazy about. We'll just jump into it with Blake Corm. Made my list at number 5. He is someone who, last 2 years ago, he was Pro Football Focus's highest graded running back. A lot of people felt like he could have, helped out his draft stock had he just entered then. He wanted to go back to college, win a national championship. Hey, you got what you wanted. Well done. But didn't quite look as good this year. It is now another year older. So I don't know, it's hurt his draft stock. Quite frankly, I mean, he's 5'8", 213 pounds, and doesn't have a ton of great physical tools. Like, it's concerning. Also, not a great blocker. Feels like it's more of a size thing than like a not being able to pick up the blitz, which I don't know if that's better or worse, but that's where he's at. He's the kind of guy who follows blockers well, does a solid job. I think he could be a solid running back in this league, but I don't feel like I see a super high ceiling with Blake Corum. That's why I have him here at number 5 on my list. Kyle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have him 4, like...
Okay.
And it's another one of those things. I agree with you. It's not an awesome running back class. There's a couple guys I could talk myself into. Mm-hmm. The difference is there's nobody you're talking yourself into the first round in this class. Definitely not. And even then, like, you could say drafting a running back in the first round is always a mistake. Like, there's nobody talented enough, I think, to warrant it. Listen, Corum, he was just good, and I think I value that. Like, it's okay to just say, you know what, a guy was really good. Let's just draft him and see what happens if he continues to be good. I do agree with some of the stuff. Like, he's not the biggest guy, he's not the strongest guy, he's not the fastest guy, but he's just good. And so I think that's something that definitely works for him. I am a little bit concerned about the physical traits, but that being said, like, I don't know, like, there is qualities to like about him. He just seems to have that gamer mentality. I do think he could play in all 3 downs because I do think he can catch. I think he has great vision. I do think he can make guys miss despite not having that physical gift. So yeah, I do like Corm. But there are physical concerns. I think that will play a factor. And also,
Yeah.
he took a ton of touches in college. Like everyone talks about running back as like a high touch thing. Like you have a certain amount of touches in your lifespan, and this guy took a ton of hits in college. I think that's a concern.
Yeah, definitely fair. It's funny. It's almost like the opposite of like sometimes we'll do these prospects and we get to the negatives and then like the negative is can't play football. Like he's the opposite. It's like the positives is good at football. It's like okay, well yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's a fair thing to put in the positives column, I suppose. Kyle, the
Yeah.
breaking news happened.
Okay.
The NFL has now allowed for a third helmet design to enter each year, so you can have 3 helmet designs instead of just the 2.
Is this a real breaking news story?
Yeah, it happened. I saw
Okay.
like a bunch of notifications on Twitter. I'm like, "Oh my god, what did I miss? Is Tom Brady coming back to play for the 49ers?" No, the helmet thing.
Uh, yeah, I don't know what to do with that information.
Okay, well, the audience wants to know, Kyle. Maybe we need to give your thoughts on the new helmet, the 3
Yeah.
helmet designs instead of why do we need 3?
I guess to sell more hats.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's it. Well, but they don't really sell. I guess they sell helmets, right, in the team store, like those little helmet things.
Well, the mini helmets, but the big thing is you can put it on a cap. I think that's the big thing.
Can you? I don't know. I thought you can just make. I guess so. I don't know if whatever. We don't need to. We can. Let's move on. Number 4 on my list, Marshawn Lloyd, out of USC, who is very explosive, very shifty. I think that the running aspect of the running back position is very good, and that could get some people to again the team that drafts him is going to get very excited when they see his highlights. I think. He's old. He's small. Not horribly small, but small. I mean, he's 5'9", 210. He's old, small, and he can't block. But other than that, there's a lot to like about Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah, I watched a lot of USC football last year. I like Lloyd. I have him on my honorable mention. I don't know. Like, it feels weird to say because he did have 9 touchdowns and he was the better runner. But like, I just felt like USC was always better with Austin Jones in. And I don't know. I thought he was the second best running back in his backfield at times. And I think he's a pretty good player. He could be good in the NFL. Like you said, he doesn't really bring much else to the table, but he is a pretty good runner. So I get it.
Yeah, I'm not crazy high on him. I think there's 3 running backs that are clearly the top 3 for me. So let's just get into those. Number 3 on my list, many have as number 1, and I don't think it's a crazy take. Trey Benson, number 3. Kind of just a guy who checks every box, right? Like has good vision, good size at 6'1", 333 pounds. Kind of as a guy who will just run through the assigned gap for better or worse. Isn't always trying to get things to the outside, which is good. But like I said, has good vision. Just doesn't make a ton of like. There's guys who have more wow plays than Benson does. It feels like Benson's just very consistently, hitting the single, which is good. And if that's what you want, cool. He's someone who can block. I think he'll be a good running back for a number of years for whichever team that drafts him.
Yeah, interesting because I have him number 3 too. I have some of the same things. He's not overly flashy, but Florida State just always seems to have good running backs. I think I think he's incredibly athletic, sometimes to a fault, because sometimes I think he tries to break runs a little bit too early. But at the same time, like you said, when there's a good assignment, when there's good blocking, he runs through the hole. He does the job. He gets the first down. So there's not much to really hate about him. I just don't really know what the upside ceiling sort of level of him is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm the same way. And I feel like if I'm drafting a running back, like, listen, you can go out and sign a guy for $2 million that'll give you like decent, solid play. Like if I'm drafting a running back, part of what I want is a guy who might be able to be a game changer. And while I'm not saying he can't, I just think I'm not saying I'm not expecting it with him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I could see him being a running back in the NFL for a long time, but maybe never making a Pro Bowl team, right?
Yeah, that's how I view it as well. Let's move on to the top two guys I think could maybe make a Pro Bowl team. Talk about number 2, guy who is maybe on his way to being running back 1 in this draft class, Jonathan Brooks, out of Texas, who I thought his tape was fantastic. When we saw him play, the acceleration was great, very shifty, has great vision, and good speed. He's capable of making guys miss. And he's 6 feet tall, 207 pounds. only 20 years old and can block very well. That's good. The issue, coming off a torn ACL, which is concerning to me. I know some people feel like injuries, whatever. Like it's like Madden, where like you're just going to be good the next year. Not always how it works. Like that is concerning for me, and it's such a small sample size. Now in the past, it's like I don't really care about that. But like this year, due to ACL only getting a few hundred snaps, like the sample size is concerning. But you could try to say I'm not going to be too concerned about that. Betting on the upside, he is someone who could be a game changer. Still not someone I'd spend a value pick on, really, but I think there's enough here. I have him at number 2.
Yeah, I do have him 1. It's a third round
Okay.
grade for me, though. I have all these guys third round or lower, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. The concern with the injury should be taken a little more into consideration. But man, if like you watched him on the right game, like he looked like the best player on the field sometimes. And that Texas team was good. That Oklahoma game was amazing. That Kansas game was one to remember. I mean, he's one of he can catch, he can cut, he has speed, he has explosiveness, he has power. He kind of has the whole package when it comes to looking for a running back. There's a lot to really like there.
Yeah, I have also a theory. I think him playing for Texas helps his draft stock. I think you look cool as the running back from Texas. It's a good
great
look.
uniforms. It is a great uniform. So I would agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, number 1 on my list. Let's see if this is number 2 on your list or if we're very different. Because so far we've been pretty in lockstep today. We had a disagreement about the Joe Alt thing, but other than that, been pretty agreeable, which is not always from the most fun show. But we'll see if that changes. Number 1, Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. 5'11", 210, so maybe not quite as big as the other guys, but fine, good enough size. I think he's another guy he's so shifty and explosive. I do think that while you can maybe say that the size isn't great, it wasn't an issue in college. He could run through these arm tackles and things like that. I think his vision is really good. He has really good speed, and he can pick up a blitz. So, blocks well. All my top 3 guys are guys who can block. He's number 1 on my list. Again, I think this is a weak running back class, but he is someone who I would still like. Just wouldn't spend a value pick
on. Yeah, I have number 2. So maybe we are too much in lockstep here.
Mm-hmm.
I have 4 of your top 5. But I just think like if you're going to take one trait and say this is the best trait of any running back in this class, it's probably his speed. Like he's like just the speed with the ball, I think is a special trait for him. He does have some concerns. I don't think he necessarily has the best vision as a running back, but like you said, he blocks well, he's quick. He does a lot of things really well. I think he can step in and be a pretty good running back right away.
Interesting. I put vision as a positive for him, but again, who knows? Can go back and look at it. But yeah, that is our list. Do you have any other honorable mentions you want to get
to? There's a couple guys I would take a chance on, just because they were highly regarded prospects at a high school, first of all, and I think they showed flashes of being really dominant players. So number 1, the guy I had number 5 on my list, Braylon Allen. He's just a tank. He's not really good in open field, but like he's just a tank, and he's actually faster than he looks. I really like Braylon Allen. And then the other guy is Will Shipley. This guy had Christian McCaffrey comparisons, not just because he's white coming out of high school. He can really catch the ball.
Not because of that.
Not because he's white too. Yeah, he can cut really well. I think he has a lot of good qualities about him too. So I really like his game. I really like both those players. And I got to say, 2 guys I thought you would have on your list, I have on my honorable mentions, and I'm pretty shocked by it just because they seem like your kind of players. Ray Davis and Audric Estime. Just big, one cut and go kind of running backs. I felt like that was up your alley.
Well, Ray Davis, I want someone who can pick up a blitz. So, I do value that stuff. So he's kind of out there. And you said Audric Estime as the other guy?
Yes.
Yeah. He ran a 4.7, and you can tell is something I have in my notes there. I think like those are you're right. There are positives there, but I just think that I don't see either of them as like real needle movers.
I could see Estime being in like a what's the guy's name? Lendell White sort of role, just kind of that big back steal, the touchdown merchant that everyone hates in fantasy.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that he's definitely someone who you could, if you're, and I think there's a lot of guys like even like Ray Davis. It's like, okay, if you want to have him be like just a pure, situational halfback, like there's plenty of situational backs in this draft class. I guess that's the one good thing. Quite frankly, Kyle, I can't tell you how many of these guys just can't pick up a blitz for the life of them.
Yeah.
Like I was looking at like the PFF pass blocking numbers, and like the amount of guys in the 20s it's like most of them.
Yeah. It's definitely a weak class for that. I would say so. And that's probably why, like, maybe you take a chance on a guy like Shipley, who I don't, he's not the strongest guy, but he just seems to do everything kind of well. And like I said, he has like the pedigree, and maybe you take a chance on him late in the draft, and he's the guy that pans out the most.
Yeah, sure. I could totally see it. Yeah, Kyle, that is our show. Those are the offensive line takes. We got through it. We survived it. And, chat didn't really blow up at anything. Actually, not a very lively chat in general today. I don't know if it was just people aren't uninterested in the offensive prospects or what. But no one be mean to us. At least we got that going for
us. Yeah. Nobody mean to us is always a positive.
We'll see when the comments come out. Those are usually the meaner ones, right? Because people are like, in the live chat, people are like, okay, if I say this, they're going to see it. I feel like people don't realize that we also read the comments.
Yeah. It's easier when they're not talking to us directly, right? It's just easier for people. That's fine. Let us know your opinions. I like your opinions.
Definitely.
Even if it's a mean opinion, as long as it comes from a good place, just being like, you're ugly, that doesn't help. But if you say something that like has at least a tangible thought, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I remember there's a video I made a little bit ago where like I was reading the comments and I was like, oh man, the comments are really mean to me on this one. I was kind of getting bummed out, and then I realized it was just the same guy who wrote like 4 different like really mean comments.
He had a lot to say.
I guess so.
We have that sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always fun. Do you need a quick hockey corner?
No, I don't think anything really changed.
Yeah, not really.
I
guess there's the MVP race.
What, McKinnon's going to win? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I'm rooting for Kucherov to get the Hart. I think that I don't really. I don't know. I would like to see him get the MVP as well, but it feels like McKinnon's gonna have it happen.
Yeah, I think it
Mark
is.
In the chat, y'all crazy. So there we go.
All right. Well, there we go. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. It doesn't seem like a whole lot's changed there. I feel like McKinnon is going to win it. It seems like we're going to meet in the first round, so there's that. Yeah. It's a good time for sports, though. We got NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs right around the corner. It's still early enough in baseball season to get excited, even if your team stinks. And then if you're a soccer person, Champions League soccer the last 2 days has been amazing. So a lot going on.
Okay, well, there you go. A lot going on. We'll let everyone get going so they can watch whatever sports they want to watch tonight. Kyle, let them know where we can find us on Twitter before we head out.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. That is at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Grondin. And make sure to follow the account page at On the Sideline JK. That is at On the Sideline JK.
Of course, you have like audio-only podcast. Anywhere you get your podcast, just search On the Sideline Podcast. It should be available there. Kyle, any final thoughts?
No, let's get out of here.
Okay, let's get out of here. Again, thank you to everybody. We do appreciate it. Until next time, have a good one.
Peace.